Graffiti is vandalism. It scars the community, hurts property values, and diminishes our quality of life. The Chicago Department of Streets and Sanitation offers free graffiti removal services to private property owners to help maintain the beauty of our communities. No community in Chicago has to tolerate graffiti. Please, join us in eliminating graffiti and maintaining the beauty of Chicago. To report graffiti or request its removal, call the City Service Request Line at 311 or click on the button below to report it now. There's only one rule in graffiti. You suck until further notice.
For me, the world was jazz and ancient Greek. Ancient Greek and jazz. That's chiasmus, you know. A-B-B-A, backwards mapping. But it might as well have been hieroglyphics, modern art. Man, my life was a hieroglyphic and my career wasn't going anywhere. I was a sculptor. Of sorts. A year in Barcelona, 4 at UCLA, but it was all dry, abstract, lifeless. I could feel the life draining out of me every day I worked on that wood and sculpture. I had a rent-subsidized apartment in New York and 2 kids to support. Everyone has a rent-subsidized apartment in New York, even mediocrities like me. That was my reality. Then one day during a strike on the IRT, boom, it hit me.
Seat without a view, didn't know where I was traveling to. A passenger, you know that's all I was to you. Take a ride and then the trip is through. I'm just a passenger, just a passenger. And all the men aboard, they looked at me and smiled. They were on the same ride. See it by the sunsets in their eyes. They went through the same lies. You can board my train, driving me insane. Ride it through the night, I'll make you feel alright. The other men you see, they're just a fantasy. Look out your window view, I fall in love with you. I'm just a passenger. Same lies. Love looks different when you're standing on the side, watching an amusement park ride. You can board my train, driving me insane. Ride it through the night, I'll make you feel alright. The other men you see, they're just a fantasy. Look out your window view, I fall in love with you.
All tickets, please.
I'm just a passenger.
Climb aboard.
Just a passenger.
Smoking in the next car.
I'm just a passenger.
Please be seated.
Just a passenger.
No standing in the aisles.
Just a passenger.
All those left standing will await the next train.
I'm just a passenger.
One of the many passengers.
I'm just a passenger.
One of the many passengers.
Graffiti had its own vocabulary, man. Bombing.
That was when you got your name up.
Masterpiece.
That's what we were painting.
Whole car.
That is when you covered the whole subway car.
Graph.
That's what we were doing.
Getting up.
That was getting your name up on the car.
Biting.
That was when you borrowed someone else's style and had hell to pay for it.
Never mind. It would take too long to explain.
I mean, I thought we just did kind of explain it pretty well.
A whole other vocabulary. A Rosetta Stone.
I started taking pictures of graffiti in the Bronx for my doctoral degree in anthropology. I had been to Byzantium and the Bronx, but I had never seen anything like what these kids could do with a spray can.
That is no Well, horses ever tried to cross that ocean wide. The spaces keep them from the other side. When you get there, you will surely know there are flowers and a long rainbow. You may not have something to show, but go Byzantine. Leave your bags behind, let your life unwind. The streets are paved with wine anytime. Don't ask where it may be, a compass and the sea. Caruso did it with you and me. You get there, you will surely know there are flowers and a long rainbow. You may not have something to show, but go to Byzantine. You get there, you will surely know there are flowers and a long rainbow. You may not have something to show, but go to Byzantine.
A whole other way
A
of
whole
life.
other way of life.
But it was
But
real.
it was real.
And it shined.
And it shined.
And it became true.
And it became true.
My life.
My life.
I thought it would be
I
one
thought it
thing.
would be one thing.
But then it turned
but then
out
it
to be
turned
something
out to
else.
be something else.
They saved me. I was so angry, bitter, with my liberal arts education and no talent. Nowhere to go, broke, with student loans to pay, but they had it. Life, vibrancy, youth, and it seeped out of their pores for free. No art training, just crime, vandalism, but it was art. It was the thing. I felt it all coming back to me. And the sculpture I sold that rich lady on the east side? I don't even remember what it looked like. I can tell you one thing. It didn't seep out of my pores. Lots of time in my library studying Brancusi, hours and hours, like being at Stanford again. When I wasn't doing that, I spent my whole time looking at the graph on the wall of Central Park East. June, Taki 183. Sometimes the graffiti and the ancient Greek just merged together in my mind. A whole new language. How had these kids created it? He was a messenger, courier from Washington Heights, traveled all the way over to Jacqueline Onassis' apartment on a delivery errand. He was nothing, nobody, but he wrote his name everywhere. Didn't waste his time sending articles to peer-reviewed journals to put them on his CV. He got up. He was a graffiti king, king of the line. He fell in love with his name and he wrote it everywhere. It wasn't long before I was gathering these kids together in my studio at NYU and listening to their stories. What were their stories? And why were they so much more interesting than mine?
The whole experience was part ninja, part military maneuver. You sneak around, sometimes on your hands and knees. You try not to laugh because you know it's no game. People actually get killed doing this stuff. When you get in, you can't see a thing and it's freezing. You're just terrified and hoping you can see in the dark and do a straight line and not get arrested. Your heart is in your throat and any big noise will make you jump out of your sneakers and pee yourself. But amongst all of that, you have to create a piece of artwork. It's a lot easier to be a bomber and move around quickly. You make your mark and it takes a couple seconds and you move on. You're always on the move and in motion, so you're looking around all the time, while being aware of where everyone is and what's going on in the car. If you're standing in one spot trying to do an artistic piece, you're a bit more vulnerable. Anybody can sneak up around you or behind you and grab you by your feet. You always have to be looking over your shoulder and hope that nothing happens to you, which is a vastly different feeling than the relaxed atmosphere you have in painting a mural or a piece of artwork in your studio. Once all that drama is over, and you're in there, doing this piece of art, you just hope for the best. You're working in the pitch black, and you can't see the colors of what you're doing. You have to be really good at it, so that your piece can come off in the daytime. You're doing most of it half stoned on smack or weed. Or you're under the influence of liquor. It's dark and your friends are pressuring you and people who are better than you are looking at your art and critiquing it. And it's not the nice critique you read about in the newspapers. Kids can be cruel. They laugh at you, call you all sorts of names, toy and whatnot. They're really cruel if you fail. So the pressure to do something worthwhile is immense. A lot of people with limited skill can't really do art. They can only do bombing, and that's fine. At least you can do quantity, doing a whole lot of everything. When you destroy and kill everything, you can get an equal amount of respect. Also, it's a difficult amount of manual, physical labor, which is why a lot of women don't take to it. It also takes a bit of a criminal streak, a personality trait that seems less common in women. Those days, I spent a lot of time with my writing partner, days. Sometimes, when I was coming home from Washington Heights, after I had spent the day at my high school, I could smell the onions and spices in the streets and the horn from the salsa music, Guantamantera playing on a transistor radio in the bodega on 163rd Street in Fort Washington. My mother danced to salsa music and sung in a band just down the street. When she heard about Graff, she didn't understand. Like the night I stayed up all night painting a train with Iz the Wiz. I was seeing Ricardo at the time and didn't tell Iz about Faze or Ricardo because I think he wanted some alone time with me in the dark. Only Ricardo was cool. Not so bossy like telling him what to do, like my mother. She would sing her songs from Brazil with a real funky beat, and I could hear ringing in my head when I was painting the trains. All this darkness, and then this phosphorescent glow of colors, fat caps spreading the bubble letters high with a white outline. I got high off the paints, I think, and my mother's music, singing in the dark to me a Spanish love song. At least, that's how I imagined it.
After they started buffing the trains in 1977, Common and I began looking for a new approach, so we began experimenting with a new style that covered more cars with paint. I did the A on the middle door first, and then spread out from there. Each letter was the same size, covering the train from the windows down. We called the style Blockbuster. It was pretty simple to do, and we decided to run with it. One night on the 4 line, I did 4 of them in 6 hours. The Blockbuster had an amazing impact. One of the most important aspects of graffiti is to have your name stick out from the others. The Blockbuster was a great way to do that, going from one end of a 90-foot-long train to the other. They were just billboard pieces that could be seen from blocks away, wide, geometric letters rolling by one after another. When a 10-car train rode by, passengers would see hundreds of smaller, colorful pieces, most of them illegible, and then they'd see Blade and Comet in bright silver, taking up 2 cars. But Dolores and Blade, she was my girlfriend. I dedicated my best trains to her.
They came to my studio and talked about their social backgrounds, where they got their materials when all the public schools had closed their art programs. So how did you guys get your names that you've tagged all over my door?
I'm Bama. Check it out. The others, basically they were names that meant something to them. Taboo. He liked the name Taboo. It meant danger, you know? Look out for Taboo. He's taboo. Sweet Duke. His nickname was Duke, and he thought he was sweet. Stay High. Well, you get the idea. Had a halo over his head that was a puff of smoke. Brilliant. He used stick figures from the Saint way before Keith Haring was into it. Charmin got her name from the bathroom tissue because she was so charming with a G. Stony was a girl and all soft and curvy, so I could never figure out why she called herself Stony. Maybe it meant something like, hey, back off, mofo. Phase 2 was a step beyond the first phase, and he wasn't the third phase, he was the second, between the first and the third, and that's where Phase got his name from.
And you in the corner, how'd you get started?
I wasn't born rich. We had no money in my house. Buying paint? No one would do that. I mean, if you did that, it was like you were banished immediately. It didn't matter who you were, nobody did that. It was weak. Racking paint was just part of the culture. I mean, you gotta understand where New York City coming from at the time. You could shoot someone in the street or push them off a building and get away with it. Cops didn't have time to worry about graffiti. Writing culture was a strange thing. People would take you under their wing if they liked you. I'd ask them where to get supplies.
Markers?
Pearls.
Spray paint?
You gotta rack it up at a paint shop.
Graph isn't just writing your name as in a tag. It's about a word. You gotta own a word that make you bigger and stronger. What does the word mean to you? How would you use it in a sentence? I liked Kelle because it is bold and full of life. It was the kind of name that could announce itself and take bows through the 5 boroughs. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Does it sound like someone can come along and stomp on it? Is it flexible enough to be molded and yet strong enough to impose its will? If the letter couldn't do that, then I didn't want to write it. If it's a corny-ass name, kick it to the next guy.
I got my name from my boy, Scene TC5. He thought I should have a feminine name if I was going to roll with them. Ain't nothing more feminine than pink. And the letters appealed to me. The P is broad and bold. I devoured romance novels as a kid. Loved my dukes and duchesses. Lady this, duke that. We were royalty in my school. And I was dating the king of the handball courts. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I never tagged Lady, but just wrote Pink at first. And then eventually, Lady Pink, which was even more colorful and bright and, ladylike.
My mother was definitely aware of my activity, if you want to call it that. She realized that eventually she was going to have to bail me out if I continued in the direction I was taking. And I had to hide things from her. I couldn't just come in with a bunch of magic markers and spray paint. One day she saw the paint cans under my bed.
What's this?
She said. I'm just storing them for a friend, I said. And so that was the end of that. We didn't have money to buy all that stuff, so she must have known that I racked it. But the black books, those I could slip here and there. If she asked me about it, I'd just say, they're just books. She was at a teacher's college at the time. She even wrote a dissertation on youth culture. So inspired was she by my work. But at the time, it came on her slowly. I would get my photos delivered to the house. One day, my father came back and saw some of the photos. They talked about it that night. She was proud of me, but aware of the danger. Graffiti sure could split people. They either loved it or they hated it. But either way, they were at least responding. Now, Dondi was the cat with style I admired. Ooh, the soft funk of the mid-1970s. They say you emulate your heroes. You can't be them, so you become you. Yes, I was copying stuff that was dope, but like Michelangelo, I was bringing my own flair. Biting? That's complete copying, but biting and then modifying, that's influence. I like to tell my friends that I was an artist before I wrote, but I chose writing as my art and I became a graffiti artist. Spray can art? Nobody called it that. We'd usually just call it writing. We didn't call it graffiti. No one would say, "Do you write graffiti?" They would say, "Hey, what you writing?" And we had our own language, man. I'd say, "I went bombing today, doing my throw-ups and masterpieces." The layup got raided and we racked up the Cascade Green with some Flowmaster ink. We did Inside's whole car masterpiece. Nobody knew what we were talking about. It was our own language made up from cats all over the city. There were only a couple of thousand of people writing, but that all changed when a book called Subway Art came out in 1984. Now, millions of people were writing graffiti all over the world.
They all wrote, and they all had this in common. They were waiting for the train.
I've been waiting on the train, been waiting such a long time, baby. I've been waiting for the train to carry me away. Ain't no use to ask why, ain't no use to hang your head and cry. No, I've been waiting for the train to carry me away. Lights are low, so ain't no use to ask why. Ain't no use to hang your head and cry. I've been waiting for the train to carry me away.
Was very gung-ho about getting to the subway trains and doing that. We were the most popular crowd in high school, the most popular table, and we wanted to keep it that way. You have to keep going out there and doing your thing bigger and better every year in order to stay on top. Once you meet the guys who've done the big trains, people like Lee, Zephyr, Crash, Daze, Future, and dandy. You realize what the best of the best can do. You want to run in those circles and be accepted and respected and looked up to just like those guys. They were heroes and royalty of the underground. And who didn't want that? Okay, so dig. We were eating our lunch at the cool table, and I didn't dig a lot of these nerds harshing my mellow, so to speak. So I told them just to run along and do their nerd thing somewhere else. Wasn't any use in all of us getting dragged down, now was there? We worked hard to establish our dominion, and wasn't anybody gonna take that away.
Yo, what you reading, girl? Regency Buck?
She's always reading that kind of garbage. Romance novels. What you care about kings and queens for? You ain't no king or queen.
Nor a duke neither.
Yo, what you reading, girl? Regency Buck?
She's always reading that kind of garbage. Romance novels. What you care about kings and queens for? You ain't no king or queen.
Nor a duke neither. You just Lady Pink. That's what you is.
Poor, dumb ignoramuses were never going to amount to nothing. So I didn't give them the time of day. I just wore my jewelry and walked, or rather, strutted through the halls, knowing I had Henry Lee, or shall we say, Henri Lee, waiting for me at a Soho gallery down the road. I just felt like Marie Antoinette getting ready to meet her consort and receive her diamond necklace. See, when you got a name to express, you better learn to express it. I liked Lady Pink. So that became my tag, and pretty soon, the whole neighborhood was taking notice. You know what I'm talking about? That's what I'm talking about. I could talk my way out of anything. Once the police rounded me up because I had threatened a girl with a baseball bat. They were threatening to call my mother.
Call your mother.
And put me in the slammer
Put you
that
in the
night.
slammer.
But I just explained that we were chill. They couldn't figure out why a small, pretty girl like me, Lady Pink, was walking around with a baseball bat and all. I was pretty cool with being the only girl doing graph. My sister used to date some of Henry's friends. Now that I'm married, I get paid for what I do. I don't do murals anymore, and getting arrested or painting at 2 a.m. with rats running around in the garbage has sort of lost its charm.
A girl with a baseball bat. I was in love. She was the muse of the subways, my Lady Pink. When I was watching for the trains, all nervous about finishing my Barcelona sculpture for the lady on the east side of Manhattan, there she would be, her name arriving like a big bouquet of flowers from Central America. But she had a boyfriend, the best of boyfriends, really. His name was Henry Lee. He did a car called Strap Hanger, so much style. He also did a Christmas train. That kid was just in love with the world and everyone in it. In a way, he was the true mayor of the city, not Abe Beam, a 16-year-old from the High School of the Arts.
It was very cold that day. 2 weeks before Christmas, and we were at Intervale on the 5 and 2 waiting for that train. There were 2 fine girls waiting at that train station. And then the train was coming, and I said, "Look at that train!" Like you could see barely on the side of it. All the colors flashing out toward the sun. The sun was right on them, and I said,
There it goes.
I got out my camera, and it was coming closer, and I said,
There it goes.
and it's coming closer with the cars swinging, and I said, it's coming, and the girls are saying,
What's coming? What's coming?
and I said,
Look.
and they said,
Oh my God!
and the first cars came in like a roaring horse, and I said,
Look at it. Look at it.
and I was going so crazy I forgot to take pictures, and Devil, who was with me, said,
The pictures.
so I started taking pictures, but I only grabbed like 4 cars, and then the train was pulling out, so then I jumped on, and I looked back at the girls, and they were just standing there with their mouths open. It was like crazy. Like you could see the reflection in their eyes. We decided to take the train to Baychester Station, and when the train stopped, we'd pull the emergency cord to stop the train. That's our specialty. So when the train pulled in, boom, we pulled it, and I took some photographs. Then we got between the cars, It was by coincidence that a train pulled in on the other side that was jam-packed and it discharged all its passengers. They were taking it out of service. So that whole side of the station was packed. And I know that it was a shock to all these Wall Street journals with their classy suits and suitcases. And they saw the whole train and everybody's going like,
Wow, that's amazing.
I'm looking up from between the cars and everybody's going, look at that! And I see all these hands pointing. Brooklyn Bridge is lit up for the first time. I was between the cars and people were looking at me, but they didn't know who I was. But I said, how do you like it, people? And young students and people like us are saying,
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
There was a whole bunch of people. And there was a perfect crowd to see it. And as the train was leaving, we stuck our heads out and we're shouting, yeah, Fabulous Five! There were riders there, and they said, look at them. We took it to 42nd, and on the way there, we were really hauling ass. And as we passed through the stations going fast, the people were going, look at that!
See that?
And pointing. At every station, it was a train stopper. A showstopper. At 14th Street, people were yelling and cheering, but 42nd Street was the biggest. Everybody was going, wow!
Do you see that, man?
Whoa!
It was slowing down, so they could see it car by car. I know that Mickey Mouse must have blown everybody's mind. I started arguing with this black man. He didn't like it. It was surprising. He was prejudiced or something. I said, how do you like it? It's a whole train. And he said,
It's disgusting.
So I said, if you don't like it, it's too bad. Because it's here right now.
At 59th, the people saw it. At 86th, there wasn't a big crowd. But at 125th, wow! It stopped right up the platform so that you didn't get a long view. You had to walk right in through the pieces. The station was packed, and people were walking into the pieces with their eyes open like, wow, man! It was bad. It was nice to have it pull up right in front of you and then to get inside of it with the windows all painted. They probably didn't know it was graffiti. They probably thought the city was doing something good for a change. They probably thought they paid some muralist to do it. When we went into the slums in the Bronx, the train was elevated so people could see the whole train. You could see people blocks away going, look at that!
I'm serious. I notice people. I watch people on the street. People only look up once in a while. They look down mostly. But this time, you'd see people looking up and they'd really look. Little kids were going, Mickey Mouse, look, Mommy. People were going crazy. There's a park at Simon Street where it makes a turn and there's a big avenue there, Westchester Avenue. People were all crowded up there in front of the stores and they were looking up and going, wow. You could see the reflection in the windows of the slums of the cars, all painted. Every car was like a TV, and you could see the colors reflected. And then we got to Baychester. The train was swinging from side to side. We were hanging out the sides and the windows going, yeah, Fabulous Five! I was on the side of the train. I'd actually climbed out a little on the side, and before the train stopped, I jumped out onto the rocks and got to the other side, no matter what, cops or not, and took pictures. And then I heard the train go whoosh, and it stopped. And I knew they pulled the emergency. And then I heard the conductor going,
Who the hell pulled that?
Then I saw the Fabulous Five jumping out of the train shouting,
Yeah, take pictures!
And everybody's there with their 35s clicking. It was a nice sunny day, and when we left, we said,
Yeah, all right. Job well done.
There was only one guy at the station, and he was looking at us, and I said, how do you think about it? And he said,
Incredible. Man, incredible.
We didn't wait for it to come back. We decided to take the next train home. It didn't run again. The next day I went to Brooklyn Bridge and I thought, this thing has to be together. At least 5 cars. But they were all broken up. One train came in with Mickey Mouse, another came in with the monocar, and I said,
Wow, split up already? Oh my God.
Every piece was on different lines, different trains. It was crazy. But that had been the greatest moment of the Fab Five, and that I ever had.
He made me feel like I was 16 years old again, falling in love again. I felt just like Taki 183. A messenger from another world, bombing, painting, breaking laws. 16 years old all over again, only doing it with some guts this time. He told me how he fell in love with the girl up above him. You see, Lady Pink lived right upstairs.
I fell in love with the girl up above me. She didn't know me, but I didn't mind. Looking for laughter, I found it all after. We went out for coffee and had a good time. But when I got there, I had nothing to say. And she just stared at the floor. She said, "You're here now, baby, why don't you stay?" I said, "I'd like nothing more." I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah. She asked me to dance and she gave me a chance. She said, "I wouldn't mind if you moved up a flight." I wouldn't either, I said, just to please her. And wouldn't it be easier spending the night? But when I got there, I had nothing to say. And she just stared at the floor. She said, "You're here now, baby, why don't you stay?" I said, "I'd like nothing more." I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah. I always knew I would be on your side, even though I had been there before. How will I know when to get off the ride? Who will be holding the door? You always act like you got something to say, with all your friends keeping score. But what's the difference if you end up alone, up in your room like before? I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah. I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah. I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah. I fell in love with the girl up above me, yeah.
Waiting for the train. The years stretched out before me like cars on the tracks. How many were there? Certainly not enough to continue sculpting. I would never be famous. Count them. Trains. 1, 2, 3. Like all the years I spent in school preparing to learn from a 10-year-old the meaning of art. Starting from scratch. Scratch. There was an old nun. She used to scratch on the metal posts. "Pray," she wrote. The cops let her do it. What would I write if I had dared to pick up a pen?
Lee did the centerpiece of the famous Fabulous 5 10-car whole train piece from December 1977. It had a beautiful Mickey Mouse in the middle, black ears against the rust background. What an eye for composition. That was his training.
If art like this is a crime, let God forgive me.
And it was true. God had cut their arts budget and they turned the other cheek, wishing the whole world a Merry Christmas. Another painting was like a Moreau. Beautiful. But I guess the strap hangers was my favorite. All those blues, reds, and grays. It was as if the outside of the train had become the inside. But the people riding the train had suddenly become so much more stylish and beautiful. That's what Henry Lee did like Lady Pink. They were the muses of the train. The letters by Kane 1 were so vibrant they looked like they had been boiled on the kitchen stove by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Hip-hop, scratching records, dancing, jive. They swum in my mind's eye long after I had got home. I could smell their fragrance, their aroma, their bubbly letters cooking up in that hip-hop stew. These kids were creating a new language, and I had been appointed their art historian to interpret it. An art detective in the streets of crime. There was Rococo Style by Wasp, a flowery masterpiece by Mark 198, and End-to-End by Slug, Kindo, and Scorch. Slug, Kindo, and Scorch. Just their names had personality. Walter. What kind of a name was that?
There's Walter Matthau, honey.
I didn't know what to do with these kids. They were so talented. Some of them needed money, fame. So I set up a party in my Soho loft and exhibited their art. And things went downhill from there. Commercializing graffiti, not a good move. As Slug told me, when there's money involved, there's blood on the floor. Well, Lady Pink came to my Soho show. They all showed up. There was a fight on the staircase. I thought she'd come alone. But she showed up with her boyfriend.
I had you on my mind. I said let's get together sometime. You said that would be fine. You got off work around 9. You showed me pictures of him. You said his name was Jim. I had to sink or swim. Oh, what a way to begin. I had a thing or two that I wanted to do before the evening was through. You shot off work around 9. You said you wouldn't mind when I woke up to find I had you on my mind. Well, I had you on my mind. I had you on my mind. I said let's get together sometime. You said that would be fine. You got off work around 9. I had a thing or two that I wanted to do before the evening was through. You got off work around 9. You said you didn't mind when I woke up to find I had you on my mind. Well, I had you on my mind. Open up your heart. Love demands a brand new start. Open up your heart. Love demands a brand new start. Open up your heart. Love demands a brand new start. Open up your heart. Love demands a brand new start.
He had some beef with her. I didn't realize at the time that her real name was Sheila. Apparently, she left him outside of a nightclub and he was pissed off that she went in without him. He was playing bass in a band at the time in addition to everything else he did, and she just walked right through that turnstile. They had a fight in my apartment. I listened through the door jamb, my ear pressed against the keyhole. This is what it sounded like, preserved for posterity.
Wondering why you have let me down. Looking for you, you're not around. Playing the game they call Here Come the Clowns. Dressing in clothes we thought would fit. You were the first one on their list. I was the last one you would ever miss. Sheila on the outside. Looking for a fast ride. You gave them all a big smile. You stopped me at the turnstile. Waving to my love. One of the things I thought I'd say. Met you before in second grade. Never had time to walk down memory lane. You were a small girl then, that's true. I was a boy without a clue. Not much has changed for me. you. Sheila on the outside, Sheila on the outside, looking for a fast ride, looking for a fast ride. You gave him a big smile. You stopped me at the turnstile, stopped me at the turnstile, waving to my love, waving to my love, waving to my love.
They imagined they were aristocracy, these kings of the lines, and maybe they were, crowning themselves emperor. Duke Ellington and his A-Train, Count Basie. Blade's uncle played with those dudes. But instead of estates, they had numbers behind their names. Lord 138. One writer did 5,000 pieces. Imagine that! 5,000 pieces on the IRT. Something was making that dude get up in the morning. And I couldn't finish one lousy sculpture.
Look, honey, you're reviewed in Art Bulletin. The sculptor Henry Chalfont's work looked like it dropped upon New York from sunny California.
That sounds promising.
Like a bird that lost its way. Or the Enola Gay.
Oh dear.
We could say of his work that it is pretentious, cold, abstract, borrowed, but that would not begin to plumb the depths to which this mediocre poser has descended.
Oh dear. Thanks, dear. I was, truth be told, eviscerated of life. Thinner and thinner every day, wire specks, cold world, grinding subways, noise, pollution, filth. And then that bouquet of color from Latin America that could light up a world.
I painted with people from all over the city. Didn't matter if you were white, brown, or pink.
I was curious and open, surrounding myself with all sorts of people. In my opinion, each ethnic group had a very particular style. The whites were painting a certain style, the Latinos another. With the whites, it was like you were getting a tattoo at Coney Island. Very flashy, very well executed. They reminded me of those airbed t-shirts you get. They catch your eye right away. With Scene, it's like S-E-E-N, boom. You have yellow, orange, Fred Flintstone on one side of the car and Barney Rubble on the other holding a bat. To me, that's the epitome of white style. It's very flashy, but on the inside, there's nothing. It's just flat. There's no soul to it. Now, the Latino style is very slick. The FBA style reminds me of Saturday Night Fever. You got the hair slicked back, you got the moves. Slick, but maybe a little too slick. No room for error. That doesn't represent life. Blacks, guys like A1 and Scheme were very, very rough. Sometimes lines don't meet. Sometimes you have overspray and it's got dirt in it, but their stuff doesn't have to be clean because it has soul. Like something a jazz musician might create, or Annette Coleman, Miles Davis, or Charlie Parker. Something that comes from deep suffering. These were the three main ethnic groups painted in New York. Truth is, New York was very separated at the time, so the fact I was hanging out with all these different types of people really broadened my influences. It pushed me not to have one particular style, but to just be a freak.
Blade 1 had some talent. In October 1975, he did a Halloween whole car piece in 3D letters. WBLS in Esplanade. WBLS was a radio station he liked to listen to when he painted in the Esplanade Tunnel. Who knew? The piece is supposed to look like it's lying down, because no one had done that before. It's supposed to look like it's trying to be flat. The sun rising over the snow-capped mountains behind Blade's reclining name harkened back to the sun blazing over Take 5's name. But Blade used his sun differently. Instead of employing it as a graphic symbol, he placed it in a pictorial context. It was the beginning of a whole new attitude towards the side of subway cars.
If you say so. But it sounds like you're turning all of this graffiti criticism back into the kind of academic study you said you hate.
Previously, writers had treated them as flat surfaces to be decorated. In this piece, however, Blade gave the wall of the car depth by creating a background of forms that appeared to lie far behind the letters. In a piece from 1977, he dissolved 3D letters into the other lines of the composition, so that the entire thing was made up of flat planes, with depth implied only where the planes overlapped.
If you say so, Henry.
Even the side planes of the 3D letter seemed to flatten out against the side of the car. These kids, my kids, painted for nothing. They did it for the fun of it, not for commissions. Now what do we have? Not art for art's sake, but art for money's sake. Commercials on the trains. Tropicana orange juice, whole car down, American Apparel. Who knows how much they paid for these advertisements?
Couldn't agree more. When you hear some guy say, I'm going to become a legitimate artist, I'm not going to paint trains, they are disavowing the whole movement as an art. They are saying that it is a stepping stone for them to become real artists. That's crazy. It's naive. They are denying where they came from. They also don't realize what they are a part of. We created an art form that came from the letter. The medium that it belongs on is the subway, not the bus. There's nothing that can compare to it being on the trains. It's instant history. Because you know it's going to last long. What's so crazy is that these guys deny their history to jump into something that's easier for dollars.
And all for want of a little beauty in our lives. Now we have grim steel trains taking us to work every day with dogged efficiency. We lock up the artists and encourage our children to become lawyers. Legitimate employment, respectable. Work at McDonald's. Maybe you'll get promoted. The lawyers protect the industries that pollute our environment, big tobacco, and then they run for president. At least these kids created something and they did it for free. Basquiat, Phase 2, Scene, Zephyr, Super Cool, Barba 66, instead of throwing other people into jail. Imagination, vision, beauty. That's what they get for trying to brighten up our world.
Forget about it!
This is our new art, and for a new age. Everyone pays their way. No free lunch, no free art. What a world.
Now you're getting all nerdy on me again. Explaining everything. What are you, some kind of depressive? Why do you have to look back at everything with so much anger? I thought you were my Don Quixote. You with your scrawny ass up on a panting donkey. What happened to the muse of the subways? Your Lady Pink. The public doesn't waste its time worrying about graffiti. They've got other things to worry about. The public's got to understand that if the MTA could get rid of graffiti, it wouldn't make the subway any safer, or make them smell any better, or clean up the garbage, or get rid of the noise, or make the muggers and bums go away. If the MTA really understood graffiti, they'd know that it's one of the best things the subways have going for them. If the city would back us up and treat us as artists instead of vandals, we could contribute a lot to the beauty of New York.
If they didn't buff the trains, then every car would have a whole car, and the people would like that. It would be like Disney World on tracks and be one of the serious things to see in New York. People would come from all over just to look at it. When the city designed the subway system, they made some bad choices on colors. The trains look really depressing, painted silver gray and blue. An effort should have been made to make them look good, like the whole train I painted. I think a lot of people thought it was a test train to try out a new design, and it made a lot of people think. If the subways were painted nice, it would make a lot of people very happy. Like you could walk out of your house and you would look at nice pieces and it eases your mind. The colors are alive, so you feel alive with them. We've got to keep on painting the trains no matter what.
Film shot in New York City brought fame to writers. When the subway lines come out in a movie, the writers head for the theater in droves. Dean won fame when one of his tags showed up in Saturday Night Fever, and Bama has provided other examples like Super Cool was in The Exorcist. That train that pulls into the station when the priest was coming to visit his brother? Big Super Cool and Death Wish, especially Death Wish, because that was Central Park. Jess and all the other Broadway boys had a field day in that movie. Cliff and a lot of cats got play in Death Wish, especially with the scenes in the trains. They had a pilot film for Channel 2 with Telly Savalas playing a murderer who was chasing this chick. Where did she run? He chased her into a yard, the New Lot's yard. Ugh, graffiti for days.
In the summer of 1981, Zephyr, Alley, and a number of other writers asked the MTA to allow them to decorate one subway train under Transit Authority supervision and measure public response to it with an eye toward painting the rest of the trains if the public approved. I know what the public response to their idea would be. They'd hate it. I talk to a lot of citizen groups, and I'm always asked about graffiti as desecration. The subways in general are a mess, and the public sees graffiti as a form of deterioration, like garbage, noise, dirt, and broken doors. I have an obligation to respect the rights of the public, and they all hate graffiti. Not everyone despaired. Newly appointed MTA chairman David Kunich announced on July 30th, 1974, a $10 million program of graffiti eradication. In the Mahershala yards of the Upper Bronx, the first two dogs are going through their paces, learning to dodge the third veil. At a brisk command in German, Fass, which translates into fetch or better, get him, they spring into action, sinking their teeth into the padded armshields worn by the handlers. I'm so sorry that MTA is forced to take such violent action against graffitists, but conventional efforts to protect the trains have failed. They're breaking through fences that ought to be strong enough to stop a bulldozer, and they're going right down into the tunnels, too. New Yorkers are fed up with graffiti. I'm announcing a $1.5 million program to provide fences and German Shepherd watchdogs for the Corona train yard. Fences are not going to work. It is likely that they would be cut and the dogs would get out and perhaps injure someone in the neighboring community. Fences will work. We're going to set a double set of razor wire top fences between which 6 dogs will patrol the perimeter of the yard. We call them dogs, but they're really wolves. Our hope is that the vandals will ultimately get the message.
$22.4 million was used by the bankrupt city to install similar fences at the other 18 train yards operated by the authority. The mayor stated that the new security installations would not feature attack dogs because, at $3,000 per year apiece, their maintenance had proven too expensive. Instead, coils of razor wire would be paled between the fences. When that didn't work, coils of razor wire were placed between the fences.
I prefer to think of these as steel dogs with razor teeth. And you don't have to feed steel dogs. Ravitch said that he was pleased by the mayor's decision to increase transit funding, and that the MTA would attempt to complete construction of the few fences within 6 months.
The public hates graffiti, and it's up to us to do something about it. Fencing the yards will take care of some of it. Beyond that, we're planning a series of anti-graffiti television, radio, and print advertisements featuring the slogan, "Make your mark in society, not on it."
We're also considering sponsoring anti-graffiti citizens groups, legislation banning the sale of spray paint and markers to minors, and possibly the establishment of a special transit court that will handle crimes like graffiti and other forms of vandalism. The public is frightened and disgusted by graffiti, and they want us to do something about it. We're going to do whatever is necessary to wipe it out. Meanwhile, the amount of graffiti written on the trains and the cost of cleaning it off rose steadily. In 1970, the MTA's graffiti cleaning costs were estimated to be $300,000. In 1971, $600,000. In 1972, $1.3 million. And in 1973, $2.7 million with unsatisfactory results. By 1975, it cost $9 million to clean.
1977 was a good time to retire, and it was something Dolores wanted me to do. A lot of riders retired then. Because of the emergence of the buff, basically the city installed car wash stations in different train yards to clean the trains with a chemical solvent. The stuff was lethal, and the MTA workers hated it. Even after a few runs through the buff, it wouldn't take off all of the paint. It just turned the trains into a gray mess. The problem for riders was that the train you worked 8 hours on to paint could be buffed the next day, and that was discouraging. If the buff didn't discourage you, then the emergence of throw-up crews like the Top crew from Brooklyn could be disheartening. They had a great lineup of riders, but they insisted on doing throw-ups on the IRT lines, including the 2s and 5s. I didn't have a problem going over with them my pieces, but I was concerned with the direction in which graffiti was heading. A lot of good riders quit because of the buff. Some, such as Dean and Jester, turned to throw-ups as a way to compete. I didn't want to go that route. I wanted my trains to be big and colorful. I thought that was what people loved about graffiti. As Common and I continued to do blockbusters, an unlikely new partner joined us. His name was Maze. Dolores' little brother was fascinated with graffiti, and he took every chance he could to come by the apartment. In 1977, we started to take him to the Esplanade, where we do outlines for him. Mace was a great kid, but at 12 years old, he was just that. I was 19 at the time. He was a big kid with broad shoulders, so at least he looked older than his age. Maze would join Common and me for the next 3 years. We mentored him, urging him to at least go to school. Sometimes he'd go with us to watch. He'd look up from where he was sitting and say, "Gramps, how many blockbusters are we going to do tonight?" In 1978, Dolores wanted me to grow up. We were living in our second apartment, and I was still out bombing, even worse, bombing with her little brother. And she wanted us to do more as a couple. If Lee hadn't come along, I might have quit writing. He inspired me to do some of my best work in that period. No matter how far I would go to take things, there was always this kid, Lee, pissing me off. One time on my way to work, the Lee train with the dragon rolled in, and there he was, photographing it. I couldn't stop talking about it. Dolores responded, "What do you care about this toy?" He was standing right there. I did care. I was 21, he was 17, and I had to keep writing because he painted a dragon. When we moved to DeKalb Avenue in 1980, I took over the 4-line for the MG boys. The Mission graffiti writers were guys I respected because they could do so much with just 2 colors. They had a nice style, but it wasn't wild style, which made them stick out more at that point in graffiti. A train would come by and would have a blur of wild style pieces by Teen and Cade, which would take a while to figure out. Then you'd see a Mark 198 or Kit 17 piece, and you knew exactly what it said. Those were the writers to beat. It was also becoming increasingly more important that I didn't get caught while bombing. I simply couldn't afford it. Dolores was trying to get her degree to work with special needs kids, and I did my best to save money. Some of the chases that year were incredible, and we did our best to remain cautious. Dolores could see the layup from our fire escape, which made things easier because she was able to signal when something didn't look right. One night, we had an amazing chase up there. The cops came from both sides. I climbed down the elevated pole, but there was a black and white cop car beneath me, so I had to climb right back up. Oh, I was about to get busted, so as the cops approached me, I started yelling back at them, "Please, please turn the flashlight off. It's blinding me. I'm afraid I'll hit the 3rd rail. I'm begging you, turn it off." Amazingly, the cops turned off their flashlights and I took off. I ran the boards for 15 cards in the darkness, then climbed under the train and waited. That was the scariest chase because I knew I couldn't get caught since I had to be at work the next day. I was 23 at the time.
One day, Iz the Wizard called me up. I'll never forget it. The day John Lennon died. Some crazy dude shot him, just as he was coming out of the Dakota where he lived. Iz told me.
"You're not gonna believe it,"
He said on the phone.
"John Lennon's dead. Someone shot him."
And he started sniffling. A little. And I didn't say anything for a while. And the line got silent. And then he said,
"You wanna pay the train with me tonight? We gotta do something to commemorate him."
I said, "Sure, yeah, whatever. I'll meet you at the usual spot at the Grand Concourse." And we did the layup there. Only I didn't know who John Lennon was at the time. Central Park West might as well have been on the moon as far as I was concerned. But I know Iz had a lot of respect for him, and I respected Iz. So I brought my blue and orange and I painted John and Yoko. Though I didn't know what they looked like. And you know, I think I did a pretty good job. That train ran for 4 years without anybody taking it down. I think that was a record for the 2 and 5 trains. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I didn't like white people's music. It's just that I was into disco at the time. Donna Summer. Real dramatic stuff with a lot of heart. Like my romance novels and Lady Heart. Now I listen to the Beatles' music all the time. But not back then. We have become the biggest art movement that the world has ever seen. Bigger than the Renaissance. Bigger than any other art movement ever. I'm proud of my involvement. Proud of where the culture has gone. Way back when I first started writing, no one could have predicted where we are today. People are climbing fences and entering train yards all over the world.
I never did see Lady Pink again. I hear she has a school for graph artists and does murals in Queens. I'll never forget when she gave me a copy of her painting, The Death of Graffiti. She was standing on top of a pile of aerosol paint cans looking up at a train passing by as if she was saluting it or spraying it. And she was standing on a pile of these empty cans. The Death of Graffiti. She was right, because it died shortly after that. Sometimes when I take the 7 train, I imagine I can still hear her singing to me, my muse of the subways.
You sent it, now you wonder why you couldn't prevent it. We were in the park, and it was getting after dark. We thought about how far we'd walked to turn around now. I'll say goodbye. But I really don't know why. You'll say you knew. Is that the best you can do? I'll say goodbye. When I said goodbye, I meant it. Needed no reply. You sent it. Now they wonder why you couldn't prevent it. When you've reached the end, there's no way that you can pretend. And if you have to start again,